What's happening? You got the Retro Gaming Hippie. Finally getting back to doing a video here. I've been playing a lot of games, but I haven't doing a lot of reviews of them. Well, today I'm going to jump right into yet another classic RPG from the old school systems of Nintendo, and in this case, Sega Genesis, and I'm going to take a look at Phantasy Star 2. Now, I don't have Phantasy Star for the Sega Master System, so I did have to jump over to the Sega Genesis's Phantasy Star 2 line. Although I don't own a physical copy of that either, what I do own is the amazing Sega Genesis collection that you can purchase for the PS2 at a very reasonable price. It includes Phantasy Stars 2, 3, and 4, amongst the many great titles. I've talked about this game before, if you go back to one of my videos where I reviewed the Sega Genesis Mini Console 1 and kind of compared this to whether you would want to buy that or possibly purchase this disc which was much more affordable than that system at the time. So I had to use this to play the actual game. I don't emulate, I don't use pies, I don't do anything like that. I'm strictly a PlayStation 2 or older kind of gamer, so I had to go a different route with a great compilation disc. Now, this is the first time I played any Phantasy Star game across any system before. It was very highly touted on the Sega Genesis back when it came out in the early 90s, I want to say, right around the same time as Final Fantasy, I think, came out on Nintendo. And much like that, that was the very first time I'd ever played the Final Fantasy before either, at least the first one. I have played numerous Final Fantasy titles, both on PlayStation and PlayStation 2. But like I said, this is the very first time I've ever played Phantasy Star at all on any kind of console whatsoever. This was actually probably one of the first RPGs I think I've actually ever played on Sega Genesis. I really didn't play a lot of Sega Genesis back when it came out. I played a little bit of it in the last couple decades since I've started collecting heavy again. But when it first came out, I played very little of it at the time. So I was pretty excited since I love role-playing games, and this is one of the better role-playing games, or at least genres for the Sega Genesis, to take a look at it and see what I thought. Now, today's video is going to be brought to you by a little Widmer Hefeweizen in a Pac-Man glass, circa 1982, and I will be using the Smoke Gray PS2 controller. And, of course, I'll be using the PS2. Waka waka. Now, before I fire it up and give you a little bit of a look at it on my wonderful TV here and setup, I think I'll give you a little bit of my take on the game itself. Graphically, music-wise, I thought it was pretty fantastic, especially for the time. I think the music changed with different areas you go to. I found it to be upbeat, not too repetitive when I was grinding and things of that nature. Much like Final Fantasy, a lot of the dungeons, even though I'm using an online guide through like a game FAQ walkthrough, they're very challenging and somewhat frustrating. And without the book, which I don't have the book, maybe that gave you a lot of tips, I could see an early gamer getting really, really frustrated on where do I need to go. There's a lot of difficulty in navigating around the dungeon and not a lot of ways to show you how to get through it easy other than trial and error. Even with the guidebook, which was very helpful, I still kind of found it tedious sometimes. Now, gameplay I found to be fantastic. I like a lot of things it had to offer as far as different characters, equipment you could get, and ways you could use things. This setting is more in the space universe with a little bit of mechanical and magic kind of combined instead of just a more fantasy, like a Dungeons and Dragons type setting like a lot of your Final Fantasies tend to be. Now, I know that a lot of role-playing enthusiasts are going to hate it when I say this, but I really don't listen to a lot of storyline and kind of follow the storyline, with the exception of my old gold box D&D games, which are pretty simple in that matter, in my opinion. And Kuldeka on PlayStation, which I reviewed quite a while ago, I really don't follow a lot of storylines, so it's hard for me to give you a really good opinion on that. Other than I will say in this particular game, kind of living to the Sega Genesis reputation, in my opinion, it's a little bit more adult in the sense that things happen to characters or in the storyline that you wouldn't expect from a game. At this time, you certainly wouldn't expect it from Nintendo, but Sega Genesis delivered it here, and I find it kind of interesting to see. I didn't think it, like I said, it wasn't too repetitive. I think it kind of kept me going along and pretty easy to follow through. It didn't take too long to complete with the game guide that I was following. If I didn't have the game guide, probably would have been a lot more difficult, of course, to complete, and would have been a lot more worthwhile if I'd plunked down about $60. So without further ado, I'm going to cut the lights. I'm going to show you a little bit of the game itself. Now, this is from very early on stages in the game just working out. It'll give you an idea of the mechanics of it, what it sounds like, and what it looks like. Now, there is a very nice caveat to having this thing for the PlayStation 2 on that compilation disc, is that it gives you the option anywhere you are in the game to save the game with the PS2 compilation disc. Meaning I could be right before a big boss fight, in the middle of a crazy dungeon, I don't know where I'm at, and I can save the game right there instead of having to teleport out, which if I really played the game and find a save point within the game, I'd have to do something like that. So that's a really nice option to have with a compilation disc, especially as I went through not only this Phantasy Star 2 game, I've already played through Phantasy Stars 3 and 4, which I'll review down the road. I found that to be a very, very, very handy device to have. So without further ado, let's cut the lights, let's show you a little bit of the game, and then we'll wrap it up. Two really nice things. You have two buttons basically to use when you're going throughout the game. X and square. Makes it pretty simple. The menus are pretty easy to navigate. You got items. You can see the status of your characters, the tech, or what is basically your magic. The strength, because you can put them in order for the attacks, although I kind of found that not to be very much the case, and I'll talk about that when I show a fight scene. And of course, equipment. It also had this top-down view where people follow along, and you'll see that later on in a few different RPGs that I'll review down the road. This is one of the beginning cities. I like the music change. And it offers places to buy items, heal your characters. You can teleport from one city to another that you've been to already. And you can also heal up, level up, and find information. But let's take a look at a battle. Encounters, of course, are random, just like here. And you have the option is I could just hit this fight button on top and they will both automatically just attack. That's a pretty fast and easy way to go through things. Or you can do strategy where you select each individual item or their abilities to do, such as using magic or tech or items from their box. In this case, I'll just have them both fight. Graphics and sound here are okay, and they don't really get a whole lot better, in my opinion, with this particular game, regardless of how many creatures you tend to fight. One bad thing about this system is when you select a character, let's say to heal that's down on health, whether or not they get to go first, or you get to go first, or you heal them in time before they die, seems to be somewhat random. There are some techs that you can use that will ensure that you'll probably go before the enemy goes. But I found times where somebody was kind of low on health or meteorically low and they were just in a bad battle, and I was unable to heal them quicker before they were hit and killed within one round. Then that heal spell went to waste, much like a lot of your attacks probably did in the original Final Fantasy, which I talked about before. But of course, one of the best things about the PS2 compilation disc that I'm using for this is that I can hit select and I can save my game at any point of my progress. And I think that that's a very valuable thing in this game. So let's cut the lights back on and then we'll wrap up this review. So overall, for its time in 1990, this seemed to be a pretty good RPG game. You were competing at the time with Final Fantasy and probably some Dragon Warrior on Nintendo. I don't know what else was going on there with Nintendo as far as RPGs. I didn't play it a lot. I was still somewhat playing my Commodore 64 RPGs with the Gold Box series, where some of those games were released in the early 90s, such as, I believe, Death Knights of Kryn. But that's a completely different set of video and talk, because although they are both role-playing games, I really think that they are very different in the way that you can approach, play them, and explore them. But for a Sega Genesis role-playing game, this seems to hit all the buttons really well. I haven't played a lot of other ones, but perhaps some of you out there have, and you can give me your opinions on that and tell me what you think. So Phantasy Star 2 for the Sega Genesis, playing on the PS2 Sega Retro Collection game disc, and I'll show you that real quick here at the end, in case you forgot what that looked like. It's this fantastic game that I've showed before that has, of course, Phantasy Stars 2, 3, and 4, amongst many other great titles. You should be able to pick this up, complete on box, somewhere from $10 to $15, and it's well worth it. So there you have it. Yet another video from the Retro Gaming Hippie, because you remember, I don't buy nostalgia, I am nostalgia.